see some of you have introduced yourself, which is wonderful. Thank you. Thank you for sharing your space with me today. I really want to make this as an interactive session as possible. Please, if you have questions, feel free to put it in the chat box or unmute you. Good chance that if you have a question, somebody else in the room has the same question. So let's make this an interactive time. And having said that, I will start. So we're going to be talking about our LGBTQ youth in foster care, and a couple of things I'm going to be sharing is why they're in foster care, how many are in foster care, and we'll talk about many ways in which we can support those kiddos. So I'm going to start with a kind of like a little poll, but not a real poll. You can go ahead and put in your what you think in the chat box. And before we do that, let me introduce myself. My name is Vida Khavar. I pronounce it she and her. I'm the clinical director at Family Builders, and I've been doing working with child welfare for about 25 years. And I actually been doing specifically LGBTQ and work on sexual orientation, gender identity in the last 12 years, specifically on that. So, but let's do that. So let's do a little fun fact. Who knows why we have a new pride flag that has been designed and redesigned actually this year. So let's see how many of you know what it's been designed for. You can put in a chat box A, B, C, or D. So to look more like a country flag, to represent lesbians, to include a transgender, Black, Indigenous, people of color, intersex people, and I don't know is perfectly okay for those who don't know. Wow, I see everybody knows the right answer. Yes, C, absolutely. To include transgender and Black and Indigenous and people of color, intersex people. The Black and brown is for BIPOC folks, and then we have blue, pink, and white for trans folks, and then this is the intersex flag. And just saying that there are flags for pretty much every identity that we have out there. So it's wonderful that you all knew what it meant. It's great. So I just want to talk a little bit about terms before we get started. One other thing, and I'm sure that's not going to be new for most of you, is to say that SOGI, sexual orientation, gender identity, and expression. You're going to hear me say that a lot today, SOGI. Having all the word is kind of a mouthful, so you'll hear me say SOGI. And the interesting thing about SOGI is that we all have a sexual orientation, a gender identity, and an expression in which we express those identities. So we all have 7+ billion folks on this planet. We all have a SOGI. But when we're talking about LGBTQ and GE, and I'll go into the terms in a second, we're referring to a certain population. And the reason why I'm bringing that up, most people will say, well, that's pretty obvious, is that I've heard a lot of people saying, we're working with SOGI folks or SOGI kids. And I want to just say that we can't really say that because it doesn't make sense. It's like saying we're working with sexual orientation people. That doesn't quite make sense, right? So I really want to make sure that I encourage you all to use the correct way to use that. You're working with LGBTQ kids or folks, but we all have a sexual orientation, gender identity, and a expression. So LGBTQ, what does it mean? Well, we're talking about it. People are saying there's so many letters after it's like the alphabet. Lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, Q for queer, questioning, GE, gender expensive. And then the plus really to encompass all the other identities and expression. And we're going to talk a little bit about that today. And really, a lot of them are beyond the binary, and we'll talk a lot about that today. But I really want to make sure that you all know you don't have to know all of the terms that comes after LGBTQ. No, this is a field that's advancing very, very rapidly. No one's expecting you to know all of the terms. So if you don't know a term, with our technology, it's great. You put it in your search engine and you figure out what it is. And you can also ask somebody, if you have a young person who identifies genderqueer, for example, and say, well, I'm genderqueer. It's because it may mean something different to different kiddos. It's completely okay for you to say, first of all, thank you for sharing that with me and trusting me. And do you mind telling me what it means to you to be genderqueer? It's that easy. So I would say, to not get bogged down on, oh my God, I don't know the term. What are they going to think of me? No, there's no way you're going to know all the term. It's okay to say, can you tell me what that means to you? And you can also use your search engine. I think the most important part of saying all this is we want to make sure that the individual or the child or the youth that is in front of us feels respected as an individual. Even if you don't know the identity that they are identifying with, you know that they exist. And so you want to validate that for the person that's in front of you. So I'm going to continue with a video, and then we can talk about it. Let me make sure I optimize everything. Here we go. There we go. Let's go.
You might not know there's a difference between gender and sex, but there's more to it than just he and she. Because gender is a spectrum, there are dozens of different gender identities, but there are only 3 sexes. Gender is a social construct, and sex is more of a science. Your sex is assigned at birth based on biological characteristics like chromosomes, reproductive organs, and other features that you're born with. If you have 2 X chromosomes, you're assigned female. If you have 1 X and 1 Y chromosome, you're assigned male. And if you have both male and female reproductive organs, you're considered intersex. Intersex people have an anatomy or physiology that does not fit into the socially constructed definitions of a female or a male body. Around 1.7% of the population is intersex. That's nearly as many people as there are redheads. Sometimes intersex people can have both ovaries and testicular tissue, or have higher hormone levels that are not typically seen in an assigned sex. Gender, on the other hand, is how you identify and express yourself to others. It's not a fixed state, but a continuum that can change over time. While most of popular culture focuses on 2 genders, there are many people who identify as non-binary, which means they don't identify as a man or a woman. There are also many cultures, past and present, that recognize more than 2 genders. For example, the Incas worshipped a dual-gendered god. Native American communities recognize 2-spirit people, who most tribes see as embodying a gender identity separate from men and women. And in indigenous Hawaiian culture, a person could be assumed male or female, but decide to take on a gender role opposite theirs, somewhere in between, or one that incorporates both masculine and feminine roles. Today, there are many gender identities and many ways to express them. There are over 50 gender pronouns like Z and Zim, and as of 2021, Facebook offers more than 50 gender options for users to choose from.
All right. Any thoughts? Any surprises? Anything that you didn't know? You can put in a... Oh, good. It's a great video to explain difference between sex and gender identity and all that. Yes, definitely. I often also get people who are surprised that there's as many intersex folks being born that people with red hair. It's fairly common, right? So great. All right, so
I was also heartened to hear that there's more options on Facebook. I think that's one of the things all of our social media, from Microsoft Teams to Zoom, needs to allow as easier ways to identify, because I still get a lot of pushback sometimes from staff that say, why do I have to identify? It should just be available and an option, and it shouldn't be controversial. Thank you.
Agreed 100%. Thank you for that. I agree 100% on that. Yes, absolutely. So I'm going to move next. This is a binary gender abacus. So binary meaning 2 sides, right? Male and female. And this is just for us to kind of get used to, or when I want to explain the difference between anatomy, gender identity, gender expression, and sexual and romantic attraction. So, anatomy, very easy. A baby's born, the nurse, the doctor, whoever, takes the baby out of the womb, looks at the baby, it has a penis, it's a male. It has it has a vagina, it's a girl. That's been defined, right?
We stop whenever you're ready to eat, okay?
I have somebody here that's not muted, so if you would do me a favor and mute yourself, that'd be wonderful. Unless you have a question, which is totally okay. So gender identity however, is not necessarily matches the sex assigned at birth. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this because I think most of you here in this room know what I'm talking about. But it's really a sense of self, of who you are, and it can come as early as 3 or 4 years old. Where you have a little kid who will say, "I'm not a boy, I'm not a boy," or "I'm not a girl, I'm not a girl." But it can also come a little bit later. People may realize a little bit later that their, gender identity doesn't necessarily match their sex assigned at birth. And gender expression is also separate from that. Because it is the way someone chooses to appear in public, their mannerism, the way they dress, it can be a little more masculine, a little more feminine, again, very, very binary here. And then separate from that is sexual and romantic attraction, which are two different things. But really the way someone is attracted to somebody romantically or in a sexually. So this is just, I'm not spending a lot of time on this, but this is just to explain that all these 4 categories, or 5 actually, all live separate from one another. So someone who's assigned sex assigned at birth was female may actually identify as a male in their gender identity. Their gender expression might be in between male and female, and their sexual and romantic attraction may be different. Maybe they're attracted to different people, right? So it's important to see these as separate. And so that's what I'm going to say about that before I move on to the most interesting part of this presentation. We are now understanding that binary notion of biology, sexual orientation, gender really goes way beyond the binary, way beyond just being male and female. And for some of us, this information might come as a surprise. For some of us, it's not a surprise. We've heard of it, but it's still a little bit like, whoa, that's a little bit more than I can take in my brain. I'm 54 years old, so for 40 plus years, I was raised in a binary world. I lived in a binary world, thinking everything was either boy or girl, female and male. And, more and more as this science developed and we are seeing other cultures as well, we're realizing that there is way more than just a binary way of thinking of things. One of the first things to think about is that as of 2021, 1.2 million folks in the United States identify as non-binary. So that's quite a bit. And those are self-identified. Think about the people we didn't interview, people who didn't know at the time. So that's quite a bit, quite a few people. So now I'm going to invite you. And this is where the first time I saw that, I was like, whoa. I'm going to invite you to take a journey in understanding that gender actually lives in a galaxy. So we're going to forget, spectrum. We're going to forget, binary. We're going to allow ourselves, I'm asking you to take this journey, allow yourself of thinking about gender in living into a galaxy. And for each gender, there is a planet. And just like we're right now, NASA and all these other folks are sending stuff in the sky and in the universe and in space and finding more planets and more, a lot more things than we thought. This is kind of where we're at now. We're understanding that gender goes way, way, way beyond the binary. And when we allow gender to exist in a galaxy, it's an infinite possibility of genders. And so we may go through some of the genders we have here, but I want to make sure that you understand that there are way many more genders than just what's on this particular slide. So here we talk about transgender folks. We talk about cisgender. For those of you who may not know, cisgender is when your sex assigned at birth matches your gender identity. So for example, me, I was born, my sex assigned at birth was female, and I identify as a female. Therefore, I'm cisgender. We also have folks who identify as genderqueer, and it's important to ask what that means to them, because genderqueer might be somebody who's comfortable being more fluid, or maybe not having, really identify as any gender, definitely not man and woman. So it's very important when people identify to us to ask them, particularly youth, what it means to them. There are folks who identify as agender. They don't have a gender at all. Not male, not female, no gender at all. There are some folks who identify as gender fluid. They can go between several genders from time to time, and that can change over time. We have neutrois. I often get like, does that mean? Neutrois is a person who identify as having a null gender. So is that like a gender? Not quite. So I'm bringing up the difference because I want you all to see that there are very minute details in ways people may identify themselves. And although you may not always know of someone's gender, what it means to be neutrois or agender, it's so important to know that these gender exist. Do not erase people from this planet, right? Because of their identity. There's many folks, and we'll talk about that in a minute, many cultures who have more than two genders. And by that, I mean, if we count male as a gender, female as another gender, there are people who have third, fourth, fifth genders. You know, we took earlier, the video talked about our Native Americans who have two spirit folks. And there are other genders that have existed throughout history, which we'll discuss in a moment. So any question on that? Okay. You're free to put any question you have in the chat box or interrupt me. Yeah, so I'm going to play a video. Let's listen to what it means to be non-binary from Micah.
Hi, my name is Micah. I am 15, and I'm here to answer some questions about being non-binary. So for me, being non-binary is really just like figuring out what identity fit me best. I realized that I wasn't really a guy or a girl. I didn't fit the gender binary, and being this way just feels better to me. I use gender-neutral pronouns, they and them, and I use gender-neutral language to describe myself. So the most commonly used gender-neutral pronouns are they and them. They are gender-neutral, which means they don't really have either male or female labels attached to them. They and them have actually been used as singular pronouns since around the 14th century. You probably use it as a singular pronoun all the time without recognizing it. Like, if there's someone across the parking lot, you could just say like, hey, I think they double parked. There are some pretty funny alternatives, like they'dies and gentle thems, which I quite like. But you can also just say everyone or folks or y'all. A really nice alternative actually that I heard was date mate instead of boyfriend or girlfriend. When I first came out, yeah, my brother immediately started calling me his sibling. Figuring out that I was non-binary is one of the hardest things for me, at least to put into words. I do remember just thinking that there is something wrong with me, that I am the weird kid for wanting to hang out with like only the guys or only the girls when I shouldn't be. But it's different now. It's correct in a way that is weird and new, and I can find other people who feel what I'm feeling, and I can talk to them and I can make friends. For me, finding this particular label has been pretty amazing.
Any thoughts? Anything that came up for you while you were watching it?
I'll just quickly comment here, Vida. I think it's so great that there are, additional spaces that get to talk about this, especially in youth groups, so that this can be integrated in the way that we do social work and the way that we care for families.
Yes, thank you for that. Absolutely. Absolutely. Agreed. And it's pretty obvious that Micah has been supported by their parent and that they're comfortable with themselves. It may not be the case of all the kiddos that we work with, but it's important to realize that even for Micah, the journey was not easy, right? So let's continue talking about non-binary. You know, non-binary identities and colonialism, that's usually what I put them together. Because when you think about it, non-binary gender, or any gender that's not exclusively male or female, can be a little bit of both. It can be something in between, something completely outside, or something completely different. Every single non-binary person may be able to describe their own identity in a different way. But the interesting thing is that non-binary people, just like trans people, It's not new. They've existed for all recorded history. Thriving cultures have recognized and revered several genders, not just two genders. Hundreds of distinct society around the around the globe still have their long established tradition for third, fourth, or fifth genders. We talked a little about Samoa earlier in the video. In Hawaii, they also had a third gender, which, because of colonization, is almost completely instinct, and so we have to think about how these different identities have been around but have been erased sometime along, with history. So so it's really important to know that they still exist. It's terms like transgender, gay, male and female, thinking there's only two sexuality, two gender, or two sexes. It's really just the way we as a Western society are thinking about it. And so when you think about it, gender is really more of a construct, just like race. So it's really important for us to understand that gender has been put upon us just like race has. So for example, let's think about how gendered our culture is. Think of ways we think about gender here. Think about the things that are gendered in our world. And feel free to unmute yourself, put it in your chat box. And I appreciate all the conversation that's happening. That's wonderful. So think of gendered items. What can you think about?
Just offhand, having lady shavers that are pink pens versus blue
That's
pens.
it. Thank you. Thank you.
And that being more expensive.
Yes,
Depending on where you are.
100% agree with you. And I'll say, go to your drugstore and get a giggle on me and look at everything that's gendered. Razors, pink razors, dark razors. I see almost everything's marketed for gender. That's right. Clothing, that's correct. Pink and blue, which that's my biggest pet peeve. Who said that in this country, pink is associated with more feminine, with girls? Who said that? Because if you go to Italy, men wear pink without hesitating. It is just as masculine of color as it is a feminine color. It doesn't matter. It's just like green or yellow. In Europe in general, pink is not necessarily just a feminine color. So you can understand the construct here, right? Who said pink is a girl's color? Kid toys absolutely are gendered. Sport, gear for sports, sections in every store, absolutely. And again, next time you go to your drugstore, get a giggle on me. Go and look at shaving cream. You've got shaving cream for women. They're in pink little, and they're more expensive. And then you've got shaving cream for men in the darker, darker canisters. I bet the stuff inside is the same. Shampoo, we've got shampoo for men and women. When I was growing up, we had one shampoo for the whole family. It didn't matter what gender we were, but now there's shampoo for women and there's shampoo for men, right? Vitamin pills. My vitamin pills are pink. It's ridiculous when you think about it. So this is a great way to start thinking about, oh, wow, gender is really a construct. It's something that somebody somehow, somebody has marketed or has made in that way, and then we just follow with it. But when you look at the logic behind it, there is none. So let's look at this slide. All these folks on this slide, all of them actually identify as non-binary, and all of them use they, them pronouns. What do you notice? Peace within, that's beautiful, Antonia, thank you. Peace within is a great way, it's a very beautiful thing to say. What else? No two look the same. Thank you, Angelina, yes. They're just human. Different culture, 100% different culture, yes. They don't all look the same, correct. They're human, you see people, yes. What else? Some have long hair, some have short hair, absolutely. Yep. Freedom to express themselves, yes. Older picture, yes, different time in history, right? Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you, folks, thank you. And that's just it. There is not one look to being non-binary. I love the variety and the wonderful freedom of style and expression, not gender stereotypical, a range of looks. You're all right, absolutely. So the point of this slide is to say there is no one look to non-binary. Non-binary folks look like everybody, all of us, right? There's no way to know. In fact, you may look at some of these folks and may assume, oh, this person must be a female, or this person must be male. But they actually identify as non-binary. So assuming someone's gender by looking at them, which is what we were all raised to do for many, many, many years. So this is a way of, we're going to have to unlearn what we've learned all our lives, is that really there's no way to tell someone's gender just by looking at them. There's no one look. So thank you for and some people here are famous, some are not, and yet most of them use they them. They may use also some neo pronouns. We can talk about that in a little bit. The bi umbrella. I'm not going to go through every single term you see on this slide, but what this brings me to is that we also need to be thinking about sexuality in terms of living in a galaxy. Just like we did gender identity living in a galaxy, so is sexuality. So for every sexual identity is a different planet. And these are not just the one that exists. There's many, many more. So there's also a limitless amount of sexual identities in this world that we may not be aware of. And because we're not aware of, we think they don't exist. But they do. So, I'm sure that you've heard the word heterosexual, gay, lesbian, questioning, probably bisexual. I'm pretty sure we're all familiar with these. You might heard queer, and you heard me say genderqueer earlier. So if you have a youth who identifies queer, you may want to ask them what it means to them. Can you tell me what it means to you to identify as queer? Pansexual. A lot of people ask me what pansexual. A lot of our youth identifies pansexual, which is different than bisexual. Pansexual is someone who's attracted to all genders, all of them, not just men and women, but all of them. Men, women, transgender, non-binary, and any gender that exists, right? Asexual. A lot of our youth recently have told me, many of them say I'm ace, which means asexual. So they do not feel that they have any sexual orientation for anyone. And I don't know about you folks, but as far as I'm concerned, if I have a teenager that identifies ace, I'm totally fine with that. There's no problem at all. Questioning monosexual. Someone whose sexual orientation is only towards one gender. So if you're attracted just to men, or if you're attracted just to women, or a man who's attracted just to men, that's a monosexual. Woman attracted just to men, monosexual. Demisexual, I get that question a lot. What does that mean? Demisexual is someone who needs to get to know somebody really well and develop a bond before they're comfortable having a sexual relationship with them. And lo and behold, that might be us here in this, the 28 of us here in this room. There's some of us might be that way. We're not comfortable having a sexual relationship with someone before we get to know them really well. And some people are completely comfortable meeting somebody and having a sexual relationship with them, right? So who knew? Some of us maybe identify as demisexual when you think of it. So there's many, 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 many different ways of identifying themselves. I see Antonia also supporting those who are parents and being open with their children and families. Absolutely, yes. And we're going to spend some time talking about that in a minute. Yes. So like I said, I'm not going to go through every single word that you see here, because like I said, put them in your search engine, they'll come up. I could spend 10 minutes explaining each, but I don't think it's really important. What's important is to know that if somebody introduced themselves or shares with you a sexual orientation or a gender identity that you're not familiar with, that you have never heard of, it doesn't mean they don't exist. It just means you haven't heard of it. All right. Any thoughts or comments before I switch gear? Okay. So why this matters? Why am I even here talking about all this? Well, the most recent research have identified that 34% of all youth in child welfare identifies LGBTQ+. That is 1 in 3, folks. 1 in 3 children in child welfare identifies LGBTQ. So if you have more than 3 children on your caseload, there's a good chance you have an LGBTQ kid. You may not know about it, but there's a good chance. And 60% of these youth are youth of color. Why am I bringing this up? Because we want to think about the intersection, right, of race, ethnicity, culture, and SOGI, and sexual orientation and gender identity. But the fact that 60% of these youth are youth of color, we really want to be thinking about their experience in the system with LGBTQ plus stigma and systemic racism, So how are their experience in the system when they embody more than one identity that can be discriminated against? 1 in 5 young people in the juvenile justice system identify as LGBTQ+, and 85% of these youth are youth of color. So again, intersection, right? Of the 1.6 million youth we have on our street, I think it's 46% identify as LGBTQ. And they're on the street because they've run away from placement or run away from their home or have been kicked out. And of course, they're disproportionately represented in the commercially sexually exploited children, CSEC population, because of the high level of homelessness. Now, talking about much darker statistics, the Trevor Project has done a mental health survey since 2020. This is their 3rd one. And the numbers are really scary. Of the 28,000 youth they between the age of 13 and 24 that they interviewed, 14% of them said that they had attempted a suicide in the last year. And that's more than 1 in 5 transgender and non-binary youth. 14%. 46% said they seriously considered a suicide. 28% of LGBTQ youth who experience housing instability also reported a suicide attempt. And 56% of trans and non-binary youth said that they did not receive the mental health care that they wanted because they were concerned of the lack of competence of their provider. These are pretty stark statistics, which we're really talking about life and death at this point. My final statistic, but slide. LGBT youth in foster care are 3 times more likely to attempt a suicide. 38% of LGBTQ plus foster youth of color reported a past attempt suicide this past year. 45% of trans and non-binary youth reported a suicide attempt this past year. And nearly 1 in 4 Black LGBTQ plus youth in foster care reported a suicide attempt this past year. This is why this matters. And I always pause a little bit because I want this to sit in with people. Like how important it is that we recognize our LGBTQ and we affirm them. Now, in contrast, there are some good news. Trans and non-binary youth report having their pronoun respected by almost all people in their life, attempt suicide by half the rate. Simple pronouns. Trans and non-binary youth with access to gender affirming clothing, grooming product, etc., also report a lower attempt of suicide. And finally, teens who perceive parental support are 93% less likely to attempt a suicide. Huge. And so we'll talk about the Youth Acceptance Project and how we can work on that shortly. But before that, let's listen from our LGBTQ youth themselves, telling us what their experience in foster care has been for them.
I identify as a trans male.
I identify as pansexual.
I identify as gender fluid and I use they them pronouns.
I identify as bisexual.
I identify as a transgender male, also gay and foster youth.
I kind of started to think about it when I was about 9 years old, and then when I was 11 is when I first came out to myself.
So I was born as a female, but I've never really felt that way ever since I was little, ever since I can remember, really.
Last year I was identifying as transgender, but then I started realizing I don't know if I'm quite there yet.
People were telling me, no, you're a girl, and I was like, no, I'm not. I know who I am. And then it got to a point where I was like, wait, do I know who I am?
Identity is something you have to discover yourself. Nobody can make it for you. You have to make it yourself.
It makes me very unique. That's what I know.
For me, acceptance is really looking at someone and realizing no matter who they identify as, what they're going through, you're still gonna have that care for them. You're still gonna help them out when they need it. You're still gonna be there for them.
Being like welcomed and being like cared for.
A lot of foster homes just won't accept LGBT youth.
You never know, is this family gonna accept me? Are they gonna be okay with me being transgender, gender fluid?
And that's where my identity struggled too, because I was like, okay, well then, whose kid am I? Where is my home? Where do I belong?
It's been hard not to like compare myself to other people.
I was called a faggot. I was called a dyke.
You don't belong here, tranny, faggot.
I was depressed, I was lonely, I was hopeless, I felt like nothing. I felt empty, I felt like nothing mattered. To me, it's amazing.
It's felt like a safe haven for me. After so many years of like hiding and being cautious, I finally get to actually express who I want to be.
Feels like I'm at home, like I'm free to be who I want to be and be as loud as I want. There's always going to be people that will understand you and will feel like home eventually, like you'll find your place.
You will get through this. It won't last forever.
If you are struggling or if you need someone, seek them out. You don't have to hide. You don't have to suffer.
It's okay to be scared, and you're gonna be scared. But remember that no matter what, you're not alone. You're not.
There's always someone out there who does care about you.
All right. Any thoughts Comments? Surprises? Yeah, it's a strong video. Yeah. It's the best when it's from their.
It's powerful to hear them, especially when you have family members who, I myself, growing up, had an uncle who embraced who he was. Amazing. But I have also a lot of family members that didn't accept him. And I also have family that stayed hidden for so long, ashamed because of the way our culture is, right?
Mhm.
And to see our children today standing up for themselves and speaking out, especially when they're experiencing the negativity, but still standing strong, is really amazing to see. And the importance of supporting them no matter what, because it is who they identify. It's not who we want them to identify. It's something that I kept with my own children. I have 7, and I always inform them, no matter who you are, what you choose to do with your own body, as long as you're safe, is your right. I know it's not like that in a lot of households. I am a Native American Latina, so these are not things that our family through generations ever accepted. So to see the children today, our youth and our young adults, be able to embrace themselves is really amazing, but it's also heartbreaking because they do endure so much pain and trauma and not being accepted in a lot of areas, and what they endure in school. And it's not just other peers, it's their teachers, that they get this negative energy from. So
Yeah, thank you for that. Absolutely. And thank you for the comments in the chat box. Yeah. Yeah, lots of burden for these youth. Yeah. So let me share my screen again. So there's a few things, that we want to consider when, and we want to, and by the way, the video is available. You can go on YouTube and put TLC Family Services, LGBTQ youth, and it'll pop up. They did a series with these youth, so it will pop up for you. So you can, or you can reach out to me and I can share the link to this video. There's some key factors that I want to consider before we move on. One of it is that variation of sexual orientation, gender identity, and expression is a completely normal spectrum of human diversity. And, we have children sometimes who will go back and forth, or who are experimenting with their name, with their pronouns, with who they are, excuse me. And we want to make sure that we don't pathologize these children. We don't say that there's something wrong with them, but they're just experimenting. Sometimes when you're looking for a new name, it's not that easy. So they may want to try different names, different pronouns. People often ask me, I've had some people in group homes who will say, well, it's tiring. This child leaves with one name and the pronouns, and when they come back from school, they want to be called different and use different pronouns. And I said, the onus is on us, the adults and the professionals. So if a kid comes back from school, all you have to do is, hey, welcome back. Hope you had a great day at school. What name would you like me to use right now when I refer to you, and what pronouns are you using? it's that easy. And we need to thank you, Jordan. It's really important that we liberate ourselves from those, that, kids have to be a certain way, and they can't move. The increased risk faced by LGBTQ youth, they're not due to their identities. They're not experiencing self-harm, anxiety, depression, etc. because they're LGBTQ. They're experiencing those because of the stresses of prejudice, discrimination, rejection, mistreatment that they're experiencing. So it's very important also to distinguish that. Just like any child, an LGBTQ child will grow and thrive when they have the support of their families, their communities, their school, and that's going to support the evolving identities and let them be who they are. We know that trying to change someone's SOGI is useless, ineffective, harmful. It's illegal in California, thankfully, not in all states, unfortunately, but in California, it's illegal. And this one's a really important one, I think, is that a young person's sexual orientation, gender identity expression cannot be understood separately from their race, their ethnicity, their class, their ability, their immigration status, and so on and so forth, that will give this child a mix of advantages and disadvantages, or privilege and not privileges, that will impact their health status, their opportunities, and their experiences. I had a young former foster youth who said to me, you know, when I was 16, I was in foster care. They either saw me as a Black kid or they saw me as the trans kid. But they never looked at me as a Black trans young man with very different experience than other trans youth or other Black youth, or even other, you know, Black trans youth, right? So he was saying that, you know, I wasn't looked upon as my whole self. And so I think when we are working with our youth who have all of them have multiple identities, that we really want to dig in and get to know all of them, you know, as a whole. And then finally, you know, regardless of our personal belief, because I'm not here to change anyone's belief, I wouldn't want mine to be changed. But we know that in California, the employees and contractor of public system are legally in California, but also ethically required to respect and treat LGBTQ youth equitably and respectfully. And I call that the do no harm principle. Because after sharing with you the amount of suicide and self-harm, you know, and you're thinking that if you were to misgender a child, you might be the 20th person, 21st, 30th, 40th person in that child's life that day that has done the same, and you might be the last straw where the child decides to go self-harm or worse. So I really want us to think about that when we're working with people. We're like, well, it's too much of an effort. It's like, okay, well, what if you're the person that says the wrong word or misgender them once again, and you're the person who's going to cause them to go self-harm? We really want to be thinking about these things. When I used to present this in person, I used to say, how many people in this room, as a show of hand, got up this morning thinking it'd be a great day to hurt a kid? Of course, I never got anybody's raising their hand, because no one in this field has joined this field to hurt children. But if you're not respecting pronouns and names and their identities of our LGBTQ youth, you are doing harm. So it's really important for you all to think, you know, if you know anybody, to talk about these things, to talk about the do no harm. So I'm going to move forward a little bit and thank you, Jordan, for sharing the community project of Project Flare in the chat box. I'm going to switch gear. I'm going to talk about families, but any comments so far? Anything that you want to share? Put it in the. Really appreciate all the comments I'm seeing.
I just wanted to do a quick comment, Vida, that I added the link to our resources and the links and documents. And folks that are attending, you'll be able to find this in our email after the convening with the link to the website and the video. And if you have any other links, Vida, that you'd like me to add for the previous videos or graphics, I can add those in as we close out. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Thank you. So let's talk a little bit about involving families of LGBTQ children and youth. You know, historically, and you'll see that in my next slide, historically, when a youth was separated or left their family because they were thrown out or kicked out of their family, or there was anything related to SOGI, we would most time we wouldn't return these children to their families. We would keep them in foster home or congregate care. And what ended up happening is really that didn't work for our LGBTQ kids. We want to be thinking about permanency for LGBTQ youth of color. And as you saw earlier when I told you that, you know, 60% of our LGBTQ youth in child welfare are youth of color, and 85% are in juvenile justice system, the LGBTQ youth. So we have to think about how this country was established, how child welfare was established, right? it's taking Black and brown children at a much disproportionately higher rate compared to white children, and that we're more reluctant to return them home. Structural racism and LGBTQ stigma increase the risk of LGBTQ youth of color to enter the systems, whether it's child welfare and juvenile justice. I recently read a research that said if a child has 5 or more placement in their life, there is a 90%, and I mean 90% chance they're going to end up in juvenile justice or later on incarceration. 5 or more. And I don't know about you folks, but all of my trans youth or non-binary youth are already under 10th or 11th placement. The child welfare system treats youth of color very different than white youth. And I've seen that in the way our youth are being diagnosed, the type of medication they're receiving, the fact that they're not getting culturally relevant responses, criminalizing families of color, surveilling families. I used to run group home. I used to see I could see the psychiatrist, the way our white kids would be diagnosed with ADHD and our Black and brown kids would be diagnosed with oppositional defiant and much more severe diagnosis, and also receiving much heavier medication compared to having ADHD medication. So we know racism exists in child welfare. It is here, it hasn't gone, and we have to think about it when we're treating our LGBTQ kids as well. So once in the system, LGBTQ kids in general, but particularly LGBTQ youth of color, tend to remain longer and face greater risk of discrimination. I have myself in the past year have seen some of our trans youth who are white receive court-ordered permission to start puberty blocker or hormones a lot faster than our youth of color. I've seen it with my own eyes. So it's still here. And historically, LGBTQ children who left their first family because of their SOGI, they were rarely given the opportunity to return. And they usually end up in shelter, in group home. In the Bay Area, they're called Welcome Center. We have had 2 or 3 of our transgender youth spend more than 9 months in those Welcome Center because no one wanted the kids. The foster homes didn't want, foster parents didn't want trans youth. And then congregate care would say, oh, well, it's not safe for them to come to us. The other kids are not going to, accept them, et cetera, et cetera. And I could spend another hour discussing these things. So we really have to be thinking about, if we're going to reintroduce a child to their family, an LGBTQ child, we also have to think about the experiences that the families have had in child welfare. I talk about the white savior complex, white social worker and therapist who really think that we can tell families of color how to raise their children as if we know better, right? As if they don't know how to raise their own children. And so we have to be aware of the impact of systemic racism that have implied so many negative things for BIPOC families. Being told what to do, when to do, how to do it, being forced to let people in their homes, experiencing both themselves and their children ambiguous loss, right? And be thinking about how it must feel when you have to work. You are a single parent family, or you're 2 parent families, you have to both work, and your child is at home and you can't leave your child at home alone. Yet if you don't work, you can't pay your rent and you can't buy food and you have housing insecurity. And we have this vicious circle that families have to live in. When we work with families who have experienced child welfare or juvenile justice system, we have to include listening and honoring their experience. And that's what we do in the Youth Acceptance Project, which I will talk about in a second. We let them know that they are their own expert. We're not here to tell them how to do things. Don't be afraid to ask what experience they've had in the systems, because they're often negative, and it means a lot for families to be able to talk about these things. Particularly if you're a white or white passing person, you have to have these conversations with families. You know, what is it like to be sitting here with someone like me in your living room, or having, you know, to meet with me on a weekly basis? What is it like for you? What experience have you had in the past, you know, with people who look like me? We have to make sure that we honor these experiences. We also have to know that family who struggle to accept their LGBTQ child, they still love their children. They may be struggling, but they still love their children. And just like I say to people who have a hard time understanding gender identity and sexual orientation, I say to them, you don't have to understand a child to still have compassion for them. You don't have to understand somebody who's non-binary to still have compassion for them. And the same goes for families. I don't have to understand a family who struggles to accept their child SOGI. I don't have to understand them to have compassion for them. And that's going to lead us to what we do at the Youth Acceptance Project. So really, why can't LGBTQ youth have permanency plans that involve their families and their own community? So the youth acceptance is an intervention that helps reunify family and often actually prevent disruption in the first place. And what we have found is that families can and actually do change. So when we do work with parents, their experience when their child first come out, or when they learn that their child is LGBTQ, they have many, many emotions and feelings that can come up. They can be related to cultural and societal norms. What did these family, these parents, this caregiver, what did they grow up with? What do they know about the LGBTQ identities? What did their culture or their faith talk about that? Their religious belief, you know, what have they learned? What have they heard throughout their life? We have to take that in consideration. We have to think about perhaps there's a lack of knowledge, of understanding a sexual orientation and gender identity. All the myth that they may have about the LGBTQ population. I don't know about you, but during Pride Month, when I look at Los Angeles Pride or New York Pride, and if maybe some of these parents, that's all they've watched, and they think this is what their children are going to be doing, you know, they may not be aware that, you know, LGBTQ folks are just like any other person. The desire to have their child have a normal, quote unquote, normal life, right? Where they don't have to deal with being discriminated against, being different, being brutalized, being bullied, you know, so there's that. And then there's a lot of fear parent experience. One of the three things that we are seeing is fear, grief, and guilt. So fear that their child's going to be attacked, is going to be bullied, is going to be killed. Fear of losing their own community, fear of losing their own family. What is Aunt so-and-so going to say when she finds out? What is grandma going to say? You know, grief for losing the child they thought they were parenting. You know, I thought I was parenting a daughter, but I'm now parenting a boy. They have to have a place to be able to process this. Grief about your child choosing a different name. I mean, parents spend a long time picking a name for their child, and it's really hard when their child said, that's not the name I want to go by. Guilt for things they may have said to their child, and now they realize, oh my. Or guilt, even guilt that's not really guilt, thinking, maybe because my child didn't grow up around a man, maybe that's why they are the way they are, which we know that's not true. But in that their experience, it's very alive for them. It's very true. The fear of being isolated from their own family, from their own community, from their church, or any place of worship. Those are really, really serious and heavy experiences that parents go through. So why isn't anybody supporting the families of LGBTQ+? We support the kids. Why can't we support the families? So I will tell you a little bit about the Youth Acceptance Project and how we work with family. I will first show a video of families who have trans kids. So here we go.
What does that mean if you really are the only person in a specific area, and how do you provide care and make sure that they're safe? And then a parent of a trans person read a small little sentence I wrote on a trans youth affirming post and told me, "There are more of us, message me."
Follow the lead of their kid, which is very antithetical to how we function as a society. So it's very hard to kind of wrap your brain around as a parent at first, because you're like, well, my kid wants ice cream in the morning too, but I'm not going to tell them they can have it, right?
Yeah, I was not down with that in the beginning.
Yeah, because Sean's like, this is crazy.
I was like,
We're
I'm
not just going to follow a kid.
Any child.
We bumped heads on that. You know, we
did.
definitely.
It was a struggle. You know, it was like, are we going to be able to come together for our kid? Like, you know, but also leave room for our own reactions. Like, you know, and that's what I wasn't navigating so well, because I was scared.
Yeah.
You know, I had a lot of fear.
You're going to have emotions that you're going to have to try to figure out how to deal with them. You know, or that you might even feel bad about. You know what I'm saying? There can be a feeling of loss or mourning of the child that you thought you had. And it doesn't mean you don't love the child you have, but it's complicated. It's a very complicated process.
It's okay to ask questions and be in that gray area of grief. Allow yourself that. But also understand that no matter what, you have unconditional love for your child.
Forgive yourself for conversations that you might have had, for microexpressions you might have given. Our kids forgive us because they have unconditional love for us, and that our unconditional love for them shows through as well.
It's going to be okay.
Yeah.
But it's going to be okay. Not to be, it's okay to be afraid, but of things that maybe we don't understand, we don't know, we're not educated, but we can get educated, we can move forward, and it's going to be okay.
Too much in society, if there's something that we don't understand, we're so dismissive and want to immediately jump to the conclusion of that's wrong because I don't know it and that's not my experience. But that's not reality.
With support and the clear sense of unconditional love, these children will be okay. They will. They're challenging. You know, they're challenging passages, but if we can make it clear through our actions and through the places that we take them that there's a place for them in this world, that they have a right to be here. They've always been here.
They are not alone. That we are here to help them fight. That their child's feelings are validated, that they matter.
When I was imposing my own, what I thought were gender norms on my child was very withdrawn and unsure of herself, to now, as she's living authentically, she has the confidence and she knows that she's beautiful. And we tell her all the time. And it's a night and day experience. I feel like I have my child back. I have my child at her best.
Fathers should be as affirming as possible to their transgender children, because the perception is that we don't support them in that way, the way mothers do. You've led your life. Your life is now, the balance of your life is supporting your children. That's your job. They didn't ask to be here. They certainly didn't choose this. Knowing that you have the capacity to make their way easier, make their way easier.
That child knows who they are, so listen to them.
I think that a lot of kids are underestimated, and they are as much as our teachers as we are for them.
All right, we'll share these links with you. Yeah, very powerful. Agreed. Agreed. Very powerful. So what is the Youth Acceptance Project? What am I here to talk to you about? So a youth acceptance project, it's a clinical intervention that we have developed at Family Builders to meet the specific needs of LGBTQ youth and their families. And so whether they're in out-of-home care or still with their families. So it's children who are in child welfare or at risk of. And we work quite a bit with kids who are actually not entering child welfare yet. It's very distinctly focused. It is strength-based, it's solution-focused, it's kin-first, trauma-informed model that we've developed, and it's seeped in cultural humility. And by that, I mean that we really go with families are their own experts. We really approach family in a very humble way to get to know them. And really the goal is family preservation, family reunification, and really improving the permanency of our LGBTQ youth. We saw earlier that kids who receive parental support regarding their gender identity are 93% less likely to attempt a suicide. I'm not going to read everything that's on this slide, but we are actually being evaluated. So we are actually fully manualized. And we really have three phases: engagement, implementation, transition. And we really explore the grief, fear, guilt, and eventually hope that parents have for their children. So some of the things that we do is we work directly with parents and caregiver separately from the youth at the beginning to really allow them to express their emotion, improve their communication, being able to express what they're feeling. We listen, we validate where they are because what they're experiencing is very real for them. So you heard the people in the video, they talked about grief, about guilt, about different emotions, about fear. And I think one of the things that makes us different is that we really, really lean into religion, into culture, and we really allow the family to be who they are. We meet them where they're at. We don't try to transfer them. We don't walk in with you've got to use the right pronoun because they're going to close their door because this is not a mandatory program. Once the family trusts us, we provide accurate information around sexual orientation, gender identity, and expression. We kind of dispel all the myths they may have heard, things like that. We sometimes attend LGBTQ meetings with parents. We might go to school to advocate or show them or how to advocate for their children. We may go to doctor's appointment if needed with parents, or we rehearse what question they want to ask medical professional, things like that. We really try to be as helpful as possible. And the most important thing is we help team, when the child is already in child welfare, we really help team make decisions around permanency that involved the first family. So even if they're not going to be moving back in with their family, it doesn't mean that children don't want to be around their family. They want to be in their community. They want to be with their family. And when needed, we provide training to county staff, probation officer, caregiver, or STRTP staff, because we have found that we have to do that a lot to kind of dispel the myth and have people understand better what sexual orientation and gender identity are. So what are we seeing? So 91% of the families, the youth we work with, have placement stabilization, meaning that in this case, they do not leave their family. So we're very proud of that. It doesn't happen overnight, but it works. Families do love their children, and they can and do change when they need to. You can see on the other pie chart that 70% of the kids we've worked with never left their family. They were never placed outside. Some do, but not all. We also work with foster homes, foster families if needed. Right now, for example, we have a young person who is in a foster home and their father lives in Alabama. So our YAP provider is actually working with the father in Alabama and is making quite a bit of progress, which is really nice. We're really proud of these results. 100% of the youth we serve had overall functioning increased by 100%. Suicidal gesture decreased by 100%. Self-harm decreased by 100%. Schooling, attending school on a regular basis, and 97% of the youth who engage in risky sexual dating situations decrease as well. So, we really spend a lot of time working with the youth and the parents separately at first. And as you can see, we're being really successful. We have a reduction in self-harm and suicide, decrease in running away, families are feeling supported, youth are feeling affirmed. And the most important thing is that we keep children and families together, or we reunify them. Currently, we are in Santa Clara, Alameda, San Francisco, Marin, Napa, Solano, Sonoma County. And then we also provide the YAP training for jurisdiction outside of California. For example, we're in Ohio, we're in Cleveland, Pittsburgh, New York, and we have 2 sites in Missouri at this point. So so we're really successful. And I just we have about 5 minutes, so I'd like to open it to some questions and see if there is any questions I could answer. And this is my contact information. Feel free to email me or call me if you have any questions. But I'm going to stop sharing, and I want to open it to see if there's any questions or conversations that you want to have.
You might have said it. Do you perchance have any the videos? Are they part of the PowerPoint?
Yes, they are. And I was speaking with the person who is helping me facilitate this. We will share all the videos with you all.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yes. Thanks, Alexis.
I have a question. I train resource parents on having nurturing and affirming homes for LGBTQ plus youth. And I think something that's come up in many trainings is parents saying, well, when you have youth who are gender questioning, how do you know it's not related to trauma? Like, how do you know if it's real? And I haven't really found any good articles that address that to kind of give a good response. So I don't know if you have any recommendations or.
So I will tell you, Amanda, I will tell you exactly what I say. The reason you haven't found any research is because there is none, because there's absolutely, and you can say that very certainly, there are no correlation between trauma, any type of sexual abuse or physical abuse, and being LGBTQ. No correlation whatsoever, never has been. So it's a myth that people have, but there is none. That's why you can't find any research or anything, because it doesn't exist. So somebody being sexually or physically abused, in no way, shape, or form will it influence whether they're going to become LGBTQ. And sometimes I will say to folks, imagine all the people, unfortunately, who have been sexually or physically or have experienced trauma who are not LGBTQ, right? So how would we explain that? There's no correlation there either. So you can say that, Amanda. And I get that question all the time. And somebody here asked me to repeat the counties we're in. Yes. So we're in Santa Clara County, San Francisco, Alameda, Napa, Solano, Sonoma, Marin County, Alameda. Did I say Alameda? Yes. We're in 9 county. Let me want to make sure I said them all. Santa Clara, Alameda, San Francisco, Marin, Napa, Solano, Sonoma. Yeah. Thank you, Antonia, for that. Yes, the parent and youth helpline is very, very useful. Yeah, I'm glad some of you are able to use some of these videos for your families, for your staff. These are really great videos. A lot of the videos I often find on YouTube. If you put LGBTQ youth or non-binary youth, or if you want to talk about pronoun LGBTQ, tons of video pop up, and they're really great to show because, you know, people will listen to lived in experience. So thank you, Janice.
Vida, thank you so much for this presentation. It's so well
welcome.
received, and
Thank you, Jordan.
I'm so happy so many of you folks got to stick around and attend this. We will be sending out the presentation as mentioned, and we will also be providing at the bottom of the screen a resources button, which you'll be able to find links to the TLC Project Flare documents, which will include the presentation and the speaker's name, so you can feel free to reach out to Vida in the future. And yes, Cheryl, you're right. It's rich with education. My mom is in town and we both got to listen in, and it was very enjoyable being LGBTQ and, you know, us having me coming out and all of that. So yeah, it's been awesome. And thank you for this, Vida.
That's wonderful. You're welcome.
Of course. If anyone has any further questions about how we will re-enter into the main room until 2 p.m., please feel free to send me a chat. It is now 1:50, and I'm actually going to request everyone to jump back into our main room. I'm not exactly sure how it will go, but I'm going to press stop recording, and we should be able to move on over.